has expired. Gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Goodlatte.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheriff Carter, how do you handle a student who commits a crime of violence or sexual offense on school grounds? Do you think local law enforcement should be involved when these crimes occur?
Yes, sir, certainly. We would handle it like we would if it was off school grounds. I mean, collect evidence, determine if there's probable cause, and make a charge. So that's how we would handle that, whether on school property or off.
Mr. Eden testified that the Department of Education told school districts to formalize or revisit agreements with local law enforcement under the new understanding that the school could be held liable for allegedly discriminatory decisions. Would this have a chilling effect on their involving local law enforcement?
And I know that we have agreements with our school system. Congressman, we have a relationship where when you have a school resource officer assigned to each school, you have to look at it. I look at it like it's its own little community, its own little town. The law enforcement officer is the sheriff, and the principal is the town manager or county administrator. There are times on minor offenses where it may be appropriate to go ahead and try to deal with it outside of the judicial system. I mean, like for example, we had a kid last week break a soap dispenser. We're probably not going to charge that kid because we believe that the discipline that the school can enact would be more than what we would get in the court. But at the same time, we draw the line when it comes to violent offenses and serious crimes. But things like that, if you have that relationship with the principal and the school district, I believe you can work those events out.
Do you think the school administrators should have to do that calculation when there's some violent event taking place at the school before they decide to call the police?
No, Congressman, if the school resource officer and law enforcement have a relationship with the school system, have a relationship with the principal, there ought to be a free flow of communication constantly. And if there's that free flow of communication, that law enforcement officer should be brought in on the early end, not on the back end, and you won't have to worry about trying to, for lack of better words, clean up an investigation later on. I do think sometimes there's some, and we see it with young staff, from time to time they go through and they have to go by and check the box each time. Well, I've got to get this done, I've got to get this done. And I think if you're not using common sense and talking with the people that you're working with, that's what to me it's all about. Yeah, yes, sir. I think so.
Mr. Eden, I agree with Ms. Harper that we can accomplish both of these goals of making sure that people are not discriminated against based on their race or ethnicity. At the same time, we can keep school children safe. I think that's a good principle. What does the research say about how schools have been impacted by the policy shift that you described, however?
The research is just catching up to it, but the signs are fairly uniformly negative. There have been 2 academic studies, one out of Philadelphia, where they tried to ban suspensions for willful defiance. Academic proficiency dropped by about 5% in reading and math. After the ban, truancy rose by about 16%. And perhaps the reason why was that serious offenses rose even after willful defiance suspensions were banned. And at the end of the day, African-American students spent more time out of school on suspension after the ban on willful defiance because of this rise in serious incidents. The other major academic study comes out of Los Angeles, where they fully implemented a willful defiance suspension ban. Schools that had 10 or more willful defiance suspensions before the ban that were forced to end them lost about 1/3 of a year's worth of academic growth. So those are the 2 academic studies. Then past that, we have surveys. We ask students, do you feel safe? Are there fights? Do you feel respected? And where we have the before and after, we see a negative shift. We see more students saying that they feel disrespected, fewer students saying that they feel safe. I absolutely agree that we must balance these 2 things. We must balance like keeping a firm hand and not discriminating. But
let me ask you one more question. Do teachers or parents ever reach out to talk to you about this issue?
Yeah, kind of by email and Facebook. A mom from Maryland shot me a message the other day saying that her school resource officer was terrified to talk about this issue. that a teacher said to her, yeah, well, the discipline stats aren't accurate. It's double or triple those darn stats because they intentionally make up their own forms to use instead of using the actual referral forms. And she said that when she went to school after her son was threatened, that the school didn't help her file a police report. And when she went to the police officer, they said, yes, ma'am, your son will have to go off campus before he calls us. Otherwise, we can't go in there and we don't know what's going on there.
Gentleman's time has expired. The